Love's Reckoning by Everett Cole. The stagecoach lurched violently as it struck another rut in the Colorado Territory road, sending Miss Catherine Worthington's carefully arranged traveling hat askew. She gripped the worn leather seat and peered through the dust-caked window at the approaching town of Cedar Ridge, her stomach churning with more than just motion sickness. In 3 days' time she would marry a man she had never met. "Not much to look at, is it?" remarked her traveling companion, Mrs. Adelaide Henley, a widow returning to her sister's ranch after visiting relatives in Denver. The older woman's weathered face bore the kind of practical wisdom that came from years of frontier living. Catherine studied the collection of weathered buildings that comprised Cedar Ridge. A main street lined with false-fronted shops, a saloon that already showed signs of evening activity despite the afternoon hour, and scattered houses that spoke of a community still finding its footing in this rugged landscape. It was nothing like the manicured streets of Philadelphia she had left behind. "I suppose it has its own charm," Catherine replied, though her voice lacked conviction. She touched the letter in her reticule, the correspondence from Mr. Jonathan Hayes that had brought her to this remote corner of Colorado. A successful rancher, he had written, seeking a wife of good breeding and education. Their correspondence had been proper, even cordial. But now faced with the reality of her situation, Catherine felt the weight of her decision settling upon her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The stagecoach shuddered to a halt outside the general store, and Catherine gathered her courage along with her traveling bag. As she stepped down from the coach, her eyes swept the small crowd that had gathered, as much from curiosity as necessity, she suspected. In a town this size, the arrival of the weekly stage was surely an event. "You must be Miss Worthington." The voice was deep, confident, and belonged to a tall man with sandy hair and kind blue eyes. "I'm Jonathan Hayes. Welcome to Cedar Ridge." Catherine curtsied slightly, studying the man who was to be her husband. He was handsome in a rugged way, with calloused hands that spoke of honest work and a smile that seemed genuine. Still, her nerves fluttered like caged birds. "Mr. Hayes. Thank you for meeting me." She accepted his offered arm as he guided her toward a waiting buckboard. "I trust the journey from your ranch was not too arduous." "Please call me Jonathan. And no, just a few miles through pleasant country. I thought you might like to see the town before we head out to the ranch, give you a chance to get your bearings." His consideration surprised her. In his letters, Jonathan had seemed courteous but businesslike. This man beside her showed a thoughtfulness she had not expected. As they walked down the main street, he pointed out the various establishments: Murphy's General Store, the barber shop, the small church where their wedding would take place, and the schoolhouse where the town's children learned their letters. "Do you have many children in town?" Catherine asked, genuinely curious. "About 15 or so. We've been hoping to attract a proper teacher. The current teacher, old Mr. Jameson, does his best, but he's getting on in years and his eyesight isn't what it used to be." Jonathan glanced at her meaningfully. "I recall from your letters that you had some experience teaching in Philadelphia." "Yes, at my father's academy for young ladies, though I imagine the requirements here are somewhat different." "Different, perhaps, but no less important. These children need someone who can prepare them for whatever path they choose, whether that's staying here and building up the territory or seeking opportunities elsewhere." They paused outside the church, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower that caught the afternoon light. Catherine could envision herself walking down that short aisle in 3 days' time. But the image felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. "Jonathan," she said carefully, "I hope you won't think me forward, but I feel I should be honest about my circumstances." His expression grew attentive. "Please, speak freely." "My coming here, it wasn't entirely by choice. My father's business failed after some unfortunate investments. The family name still carries some weight, but there's little left of the fortune. I want you to know that when you marry me, you're not gaining the financial advantages you might have expected." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, then surprised her by chuckling softly. "Catherine, may I call you Catherine? I didn't write to you seeking financial gain. If I wanted money, I'd have looked closer to Denver, where the mining fortunes are being made. I wrote to you because your letters showed intelligence, strength of character, and a willingness to build something meaningful in a place that demands the best of its people." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. "And what if I prove to be less than you hoped?" "What if I prove to be less than you hoped?" he countered gently. "Marriage is a leap of faith for both of us, Catherine. But I believe we have a better foundation than many couples who marry for convenience or family arrangement." As they returned to the buckboard, Catherine found herself studying Jonathan with new eyes. His movements were economical and purposeful, his treatment of his horse patient and kind. When he helped her up to the seat, his hands were gentle but sure. These small observations began to chip away at the wall of apprehension she had built around her feelings. The ride to Jonathan's ranch took them through rolling hills dotted with cattle and crossed by clear streams that caught the lowering sun like scattered coins. The landscape had a raw beauty that was entirely different from anything Catherine had known, but she found herself responding to its honest grandeur. "That's the main house," Jonathan said as they crested a hill. Below them lay a valley with a substantial log home, its windows glowing warmly in the evening light. Outbuildings and corrals spoke of a well-managed operation, and smoke from the chimney suggested the comfort of a real home. "It's larger than I expected," Catherine admitted. "I built it with a family in mind," Jonathan said simply. "There are 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor for entertaining what neighbors we have. I hope you'll find it comfortable." As they approached the house, a woman emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and a face that suggested both competence and warmth. "That's Mrs. Rodriguez," Jonathan explained. "She's been keeping house for me since her husband died 2 years ago. She's also the finest cook in 3 counties and has been beside herself with excitement about your arrival." Mrs. Rodriguez greeted Catherine with enthusiasm that was clearly genuine. "Senorita Worthington, welcome. Come, come, you must be tired from your journey. I have prepared the blue room for you, and there is hot water for washing, and a good supper waiting." The warmth of her reception was like balm to Catherine's travel-weary spirits. Inside, the house proved to be well-appointed and comfortable, furnished with pieces that showed both quality and care. Jonathan had clearly put thought into creating a home, not merely a shelter. "I'll leave you to get settled," Jonathan said as Mrs. Rodriguez bustled about, lighting lamps and speaking of meal preparations. "We'll have plenty of time to talk over the next few days." That evening, as Catherine sat in the parlor with Jonathan and Mrs. Rodriguez, she began to understand the rhythm of life on the ranch. Jonathan spoke knowledgeably about his cattle, the challenges of the coming winter, and his plans for expanding the operation. Mrs. Rodriguez contributed stories of the local community, painting a picture of people who relied on each other and took pride in what they were building together. "Tell me about yourself, Catherine," Jonathan said as Mrs. Rodriguez cleared away the supper dishes. "Your letters told me about your education and your family, but what are your own interests? What makes you happy?" The question surprised her with its directness. I enjoy reading, of course. In Philadelphia, I kept extensive journals of my observations of plants and wildlife. I also enjoy music, though I'm afraid my piano playing is quite rusty." "There's a piano in the music room," Jonathan said. "It belonged to my mother. I'd be pleased if you'd make use of it." "Your mother lived here?" "She and my father built this ranch together. She died 5 years ago, but she always hoped the house would again know the sound of a woman's voice and laughter." His expression grew thoughtful. "She would have liked you, I think." Over the following 2 days, Catherine found herself settling into the rhythms of ranch life more easily than she had anticipated. She helped Mrs. Rodriguez with the household tasks, walked the grounds observing the local flora and fauna, and spent long hours in conversation with Jonathan. He proved to be an engaging companion, well-read despite his frontier location, and possessed of a dry humor that often caught her off guard. On the second evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the clear mountain air, Jonathan broached the subject that had been hovering between them. "Catherine, I want you to know that you shouldn't feel pressured about our marriage. If you've changed your mind, or if you need more time to consider, I'll respect that decision." She turned to study his profile in the lamplight. "And if I asked for passage back to Philadelphia?" "I'd arrange it immediately, though I confess I'd be disappointed." He met her eyes steadily. "These past days have confirmed what I hoped from your letters. You're intelligent, adaptable, and kind. More than that, you seem to understand what we're trying to build here, not just a successful ranch, but a real community." "I've been thinking about what you said about the school," Catherine admitted, "about the need for a proper teacher. And I think I might be able to help with that, regardless of other circumstances. The children deserve the best education we can provide." Jonathan smiled. "You see, that's exactly what I mean. You're thinking not just about your own situation, but about how you can contribute to something larger." That night, Catherine lay awake considering her options. She could return to Philadelphia, where her reduced circumstances would likely mean a position as a governess or companion, respectable but limiting. Or she could stay and build a new life with a man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. The choice, she realized, was between safety and possibility. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright. Mrs. Rodriguez had transformed Catherine's best traveling dress with careful alterations and the addition of delicate lace trim, and Catherine had to admit she looked quite well. Her reflection showed a woman who seemed more alive than the pale, anxious creature who had arrived 3 days earlier. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Rodriguez said, adjusting a final fold. "Don Jonathan is a good man. He will make you happy, I think." The wedding was held in the small church, with most of Cedar Ridge's population in attendance. Catherine was surprised by how welcoming everyone had been, how genuinely pleased they seemed about the marriage. As she walked down the short aisle, her eyes found Jonathan's and she saw something there that made her step lighter, not just affection but genuine joy. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. When Jonathan took her hands for their vows, his touch was warm and steady. "I promise to be a faithful husband and true partner," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the small church. "To respect your thoughts and wishes, to support your dreams, and to build with you a life worthy of both our hopes." Catherine's own vows came from her feelings rather than convention. "I promise to be a true wife and companion, to bring all my abilities to our shared life, and to face whatever challenges come with courage and good faith." When they were pronounced husband and wife, Jonathan's kiss was gentle and brief, but it held the promise of deeper intimacy to come. The celebration that followed was held at the ranch, with neighbors contributing food and music. Catherine found herself swept into conversations about everything from the best methods for preserving vegetables to plans for the new school building. She was no longer an outsider looking in, but a member of the community with her own role to play. As the evening slowed down and the last guests departed, Catherine and Jonathan found themselves alone on the porch where they had talked so many times over the past few days. "Well, Mrs. Hayes," Jonathan said, "how does it feel to be married?" "Different than I expected," Catherine replied honestly. "Better, I think." "I'm glad. I was hoping—" He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Catherine, I want you to know that while I'm your husband now, I don't expect anything from you that you're not ready to give. We can take time to truly know each other." His consideration touched her deeply. Over the past days she had come to understand that Jonathan was a man of principle and genuine kindness. More than that, she had begun to feel the stirrings of something warmer than mere affection. "Jonathan," she said carefully, "I appreciate your thoughtfulness. But I think I'm ready to begin our marriage as it should be begun." He turned to her with surprise and something deeper. "Are you certain?" In answer, she moved closer to him on the porch swing, close enough to smell the soap he used and feel the warmth of his body. "I'm certain." When he kissed her this time, it was with more depth and meaning, and Catherine found herself responding with an eagerness that surprised her. This was not the dutiful acceptance she had expected, but the beginning of genuine feeling. 3 months later, as Catherine stood before her first class of Cedar Ridge students, she reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. The position she had feared would be a trap had become a calling. The marriage she had entered from necessity had blossomed into something deeper and more satisfying than she had ever imagined possible. Jonathan had been as good as his word, proving himself a partner in the truest sense. He consulted her on ranch decisions, supported her teaching endeavors, and showed her daily kindness that had gradually evolved into something much stronger on both their parts. "Mrs. Hayes," called young Tommy Murphy, "when are you going to teach us about those birds you've been drawing?" Catherine smiled, thinking of the nature journals she had begun keeping again, now filled with observations of Colorado wildlife. "Next week, Tommy. We'll start with the hawks that nest in the canyon." As her students settled into their lessons, Catherine caught sight of Jonathan riding past the schoolhouse window. He tipped his hat to her with a smile that still made her pulse quicken, and she found herself looking forward to their evening together with an anticipation that would have shocked her former self. That evening, as they sat by the fire in their comfortable parlor, Jonathan looked up from the ranch accounts he was reviewing. "I received a letter from the territorial governor today. He's interested in our education program here. Apparently word has gotten out about the improvements you've made to the school." "Really?" Catherine set down her mending, intrigued. "He's considering Cedar Ridge as a model for other communities. It seems my wife is becoming quite well known for her innovative teaching methods. Catherine felt a flush of pride. I never imagined when I came here that I'd have such opportunities. I never imagined when I wrote that first letter that I'd be fortunate enough to marry a woman who would exceed my highest hopes, Jonathan replied, setting aside his papers to join her on the settee. Even though I came with no fortune and considerable trepidation, especially because of that. He took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band that marked her as his wife. You chose to build something new rather than cling to what was familiar. That takes courage. As Catherine looked around their warm, comfortable home, at the books on the shelves, the piano where she now played every evening, the windows that showed the vast Colorado landscape she had come to love, she realized that her greatest fortune had been the willingness to take a leap of faith. I love you, Jonathan Hayes, she said, the words coming easily now though they had once seemed impossible. And I love you, Catherine Hayes, he replied, drawing her close. More than I ever thought possible when I wrote to a Philadelphia lady seeking a practical arrangement. Outside, the Colorado wind sang through the valley, carrying with it the promise of spring and the sense of a life well chosen. Catherine had found not just a home, but a place where she could flourish, grow, and contribute to something larger than herself. In seeking security, she had discovered adventure. In accepting duty, she had found love. As they sat together in companionable silence, Catherine reflected that sometimes the greatest adventures began not with dramatic gestures or grand proclamations, but with the simple decision to trust in the possibility of joy. She had come to Cedar Ridge as Miss Catherine Worthington, a woman whose circumstances had forced her into an uncertain future. She had found her place as Mrs. Catherine Hayes, a woman whose life was rich with purpose, community, and a love that had grown from mutual respect into something deep and enduring. The West had given her not just a husband, but a new version of herself, one she liked far better than the constrained young woman she had been in Philadelphia. And if she had learned anything in these months of marriage and teaching and becoming part of Cedar Ridge, it was that the best adventures were those that transformed not just one's circumstances, but one's very soul. The end.